Now let's talk about trigger press. Now you notice we say trigger press with several S's in it, right? So when we talk about trigger press, that's because it's important to really press the trigger. This is crucial because when we're shooting, trigger press is actually the most important fundamental to your accuracy. Yes, as we've talked about already, getting the sights lined up just right is not crucial. What is crucial is that trigger press. So we're going to talk about how to get a good trigger press. When we get lined up, we talked about earlier about our grip on the weapon, right? We talked about how we want to have a good strong grip coming from our support hand and a nice gentle grip from our strong hand or trigger hand. So the reason we do this, one, was to get good control of the gun, but two, what it allows us to keep a nice gentle press with our trigger finger. Because as you know, there's sympathetic reactions in our hands. So if I'm squeezing down with 50 pounds of grip pressure, say, on this firearm, am I able to put an independent 5 or 6 pounds of pressure with my trigger finger? Well, no, I'm going to end up giving it 50 or 60 pounds of pressure, right? But if I have a gentle grip here, and all my grip is coming from my support hand, it allows me to put a nice gentle pressure with my trigger finger. Very gentle. The other thing we're going to talk about with trigger press, and I'm going to use my left hand to demonstrate so you can better see this, is that you'll notice there's two different points in triggers, most triggers. Now, this isn't always true, especially if you have a single action only firearm. But with most of the double action only firearms that are out there, you're going to note that they have kind of like a two-stage trigger press. The first stage is kind of like, it's like the clutch on a car. It's like finding that friction point. You'll notice that it comes really smooth and easy, and then all of a sudden it becomes a difficult press area. Now the reason why this was put in place is it's a mechanism put in place for those that are shooting with gloves, because it allows them to get inside of there and feel that they're on the trigger and then start their trigger press from this point. So when you're not shooting with gloves, or even if you are, you want to take that slack out before you start your press. Now again, remember, we want to be on our target, right? We want to be lined up on our target before our finger goes on the trigger. But once we're all lined up on target, we put our finger onto the trigger, and we're going to take the slack out. From here, we're going to start a gentle press. And it's going to look something like this. I'm just going to gradually put pressure, gradually, boom, and it goes off. And then I'm going to do it again. Gradual pressure, gradual pressure, gradual pressure, boom, it goes off. And what we tell people is when you're starting out, try to do a count between 1 and 10. And don't try to anticipate when that's going to go off. Just count between 1 and 10 and gradually put more pressure with each count that you do. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, it goes off at 9. Good. Now we're going to do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, it goes off at 6. Do it again. 1, 2. Oh, goes off at 2. Okay, good. And that's what we want. We want it to go off at a different point each time. We're not trying to get it at the same number every time. We want to do somewhere between 1 and 10. By shooting somewhere between 1 and 10, getting the practice at applying that gradual press onto the trigger, it's going to help you eventually learn about that surprise trigger break that we call it. The surprise trigger break means that you know that you're ready for a bullet to come out, you know that you're lined up on target, and you know you're ready for it to come out now. What we don't want to know is the precise millisecond that it's coming out. So the way to accomplish that is that we extend it, and we start off very slow with that 1 to 10 count, not knowing, again, where it's going to go off. We just know it's somewhere in there. Gradually, we tighten that down to a 5-second count, gradually down to a 2-second count, gradually it'll get down to 1 second. But remember, we don't want to rush this process. If you really want to become accurate with your shooting, this is a process that takes time. So gradually slow down your count, gradually. We talked about trigger press being the most crucial aspect to your marksmanship. It is the fundamental that you should focus on if you're going to focus on any of them. The reason why this is true is because we'll see people, they'll get set up, they get their good stance, get their leg back, they've got their knees slightly bent, their shoulder width apart, they roll in, they've got their butt out, elbows locked. Oh, they find those sights and they get all lined up on there, and okay, there we go, I've got my front sight and I'm on target, and it's kind of right about on target, and they get into that floating figure 8, and they go, okay, it's right about on target, they got their finger on the trigger, right on target, right about now. Oh shoot, it's okay, it's right about now. Oh shoot. And what they end up doing is they end up jerking that trigger. So to demonstrate, I'm going to point up here. I'm going to go, okay, I got my finger on the trigger and I'm right in the center of my A. And this is about where I'm shooting right here so you can see it. That's going to be my shot. Okay, so people will get all lined up, and right now I'm obviously not in a good stance. I'm leaning back so I can demonstrate this. I'm going to get all lined up and they'll go, okay, I've got it right about in the center now. Oh, okay, I've got it right about in the center right now. Oh, and you see what's happening to my shot, right? My shot is not going where I wanted it to go. So I've taken all of the other fundamentals that I've worked so hard at, and I've thrown them out the door right at the last second because I've now jerked on that trigger trying to get that shot to go right when I want it to go off, because I feel like it's so crucial to get it to go off right when those sights are lined up dead center on the target. But as we talked about, those sights can float and be just fine anywhere there, and you're still going to get within that tight little group that you want. So it's actually interesting that a lot of people who struggle with accuracy say, okay, well, I need to get a laser on my gun. And so they put a laser on because they feel like this is going to make them accurate. And you watch these people and they reinforce what we just talked about, because they'll go to the range and they get so focused on trying to put that laser dead center on their bullseye that they get it right about there and they jerk that trigger just like we demonstrated up here, and they shoot off the target. So again, it's very important that you learn how to do a gentle trigger press. Let that sight kind of go anywhere in there. It's all about the trigger press. If you can wrap your mind around this, it's going to make you a great shooter. The people that struggle with this are the ones that just can't quite get out of that thought process that the sights are the most important part. They really aren't. It's all about your trigger press. Now, as you notice, we've really emphasized the term trigger press. So we're now going to do a little demonstration to explain why trigger press is so important and why it's important to call it a trigger press when you're talking about it. Because as we talked about earlier, the brain does many wonderful things for us. There's another psychological function that the brain performs that really helps when we use that term trigger press. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the trigger press. We're going to talk about the psychological effect of using the word press versus some of the other words that are used to talk about activating the trigger. So some of the common ones we hear are pull the trigger, give the trigger a gentle squeeze, but we say press the trigger. So what we've learned with some studies is that psychology really affects some of the things we do. We've learned that in all kinds of sports. But what we see here is that we've got pre-programmed psychology going on where our mind has already determined certain functions that our body is going to do based on key words that it hears. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to kind of play this little game here with Jessica, and I'm going to ask her to do a couple things and watch her reaction to it. And I invite you to try this with people at home that haven't seen it before, and you'll see that 90% of the time this is the case. It's not foolproof, but 90% of the time this is people's reactions to it. So Jessica, I'm going to go ahead and hold my finger out here. What I would like you to do is just go ahead and squeeze my finger for me. Squeeze that finger. So you notice the motion she's doing to squeeze this finger. We'll talk about it in just a minute. Okay, go ahead and let go. Now I'd like you to pull my finger. Pull my finger. So again, you notice the motion that she's doing when she pulls my finger. Pay attention to what's going on right here. Go ahead and let go. Now what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to press my finger. Press my finger. Do you notice the difference in the motion that's gone on here? It went from a whole hand motion, grabbing onto my finger, to a single finger motion, moving onto my finger. And that's that psychology at work, because when we tell the brain to squeeze something or to pull something, the brain triggers to the hand that this is a whole hand movement. The whole hand needs to get involved. But when we say press, just like if you would press an elevator button, as children, they naturally do. You say, hey, can you press the elevator button for me? Do you see a whole hand come out usually to smack the button? No, what you see is a finger comes out and operates that button because our brain is pre-programmed that press is a one-finger movement. So again, you can see how this can be an advantage with our trigger press if we already pre-program our brain that it's a press and not a squeeze or a pull. Now, one thing to know about this trigger press and why it's so hard to accomplish is because our brain plays tricks on us. Our brain does not like the recoil coming from the firearm. It hates it. It doesn't like the sound. It doesn't like the movement. And so our brain makes us feel like there's a rush to hurry up and get this shot off. And you'll notice that. Try standing quietly sometime at the range. Try pointing out at your target. Tell yourself that you've got all the time in the world. Tell yourself you've got as long as you want to take a shot. And I'll bet you that you get that shot off in 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds. You're just going to spit it out there. And it's a very weird feeling because your brain wants to rush you through the shot because it wants to hurry up and get this shot over with. Just get it done. I know it's coming, get it done. So the brain is so focused on this recoil that it tries to hurry you through your shot, and this causes you to jerk the trigger. This happens to experienced shooters. Now the way to overcome this is to find something to consciously focus your mind on that takes the subconscious out of play. So one trick you can use is a method that's called keep pressing. Keep pressing, keep pressing. So what we do with this method is we get out on the range, we get all lined up, we get our stance, our grip, we got our sight alignment, and then what we do is we put our finger on the trigger and we say out loud. I know you're going to say, I don't want to do this. But trust me, it works much better out loud. You say out loud, keep pressing, and as you're doing that, you're putting gradual pressure on the trigger. Keep pressing, keep pressing, keep pressing, keep pressing, boom. Keep pressing, keep pressing, keep pressing, keep pressing, boom. And it gives you a nice, gentle press. And by saying keep pressing, you're consciously focusing your brain on something that doesn't allow it to focus on, oh, there's recoil coming out that I don't like. You're focusing it on something else, and it helps you improve your shot with a good trigger press. When we talk about that trigger press, one of the things you can do to practice this, to really get you shooting well at the range, is to not necessarily fire rounds, but to take a simple pin with a clicker on the top. You take this pin, it's a very effective and simple exercise that you can do virtually anywhere, and you hold it in your finger, your trigger finger, kind of like you would a trigger. So you point it out, straight out, maybe at an object. Try not to do this in your office, you'll scare your coworkers. But you just sit there and point it out at something and practice pressing that trigger, pressing off and on. Because nobody takes a pin like this and goes like that, right? Nobody does that. Everybody presses this nice and gentle. Well, this is how you want your trigger press to be. So think of your trigger as the pin, and when you practice this, it'll result in muscle memory that will translate to how you shoot live rounds.